A low-budget Australian animated adaptation of A Christmas Carol with Ron Haddrick voicing Scrooge. We've done this before, right? Well, this is actually the second low-budget Australian animated adaptation of A Christmas Carol with Ron Haddrick as Scrooge. It's one of the most influential books ever written. Even if you've never read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, you are familiar with it. My name is Colin Murr, and I've loved this story for as long as I can remember. I'm going to be looking at every film and TV adaptation of A Christmas Carol I can, because I love the story that much. Join me this season as I go from Mickey Mouse to the Muppets on Scrooge, the Christmas Carol podcast. Season 2, Episode 2, Back to Australia for another Christmas Carol. Well, it would be hard to be worse than the 1960s one. Like in the other Australian animated version, no actor is credited for playing a specific character, so we're left to guess who's voicing whom. On Wikipedia and IMDb, you can find specific voice credits assigned to specific actors, but I can't find any official sources here, so I'm not going to be crediting anyone besides Ron Haddrick as Scrooge, as these appear to be nothing more than educated guesses. This one has a screenplay written by Alexander Buzo, who actually adapted 4 Dickens adaptations for Australian television. Plus, it has an hour and 9 minutes to flesh out its story, which is plenty of time. First things first, let's get the obvious out of the way. The animation is extremely low budget. You can tell from the opening scene that not a lot of money was available here. They are panning over the same shot from different angles, and there is often no movement in the backgrounds of shots. People are just standing there not moving as others walk in front of them. It's awkward. At other points, characters' hair color changes, and at least once we actually see the edge of the piece of the paper the animation is drawn on. We start with a few minutes of atmosphere, with people on the streets hustling and bustling on Christmas Eve. At one point, a boy steals a loaf of bread, bumps into Scrooge, and gets caught when Scrooge shakes him down and the loaf falls out. Was this recycled from an animated version of Les Miserables? Would Scrooge really care so much that he shakes someone down to find the bread they had stolen? He just tries to ignore people rather than engage. This Scrooge also says bah and humbug a lot. It makes him seem like a cliche rather than a character.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God bless you.
There's also an odd scene when Scrooge first walks in where he adds coal to the fire. His whole thing is saving money and never adding coal to the fire. It's Bob Cratchit who tries to add coal in the book. Why is Scrooge doing it? I mean, he adds a small piece, sure, and we still see Bob shivering, but why is he doing it at all? This isn't good visual storytelling. Then, as Scrooge gets ready to do some work, Fred just appears in the doorway. We have cut to Cratchit recently and seen that he's at his desk, but there was no indication that Fred was walking in. Can Scrooge's nephew just teleport now? There's also a constant musical score under the dialogue, which is incredibly distracting. Well, at least Fred doesn't sing in this version. When Scrooge dismisses Fred, I think he tries to say good afternoon, but he says
Good afternoon.
good half tidbit?
Good afternoon.
I'm not sure. Ron Haddrick is really nasal and over the top in these early scenes, and it's a lot. He does do a good job once Scrooge softens a bit, but this is just caricature. The charity workers really have weird delivery too. They sound like they recorded each word individually before rearranging them into the proper sentence order.
At this festive time of the year, sir, I urge you to consider the plight of the poor.
The animation is also so minimalist that it looks like they have their pants on backwards. However, in spite of the awkward animation and voice acting, there are some surprisingly faithful moments here. When Bob Cratchit goes home, he slides down a slide at Cornhill, something we haven't seen since the 1930s. When he gets home, he plays blind man's buff with his children, another thing from the book we almost never get. Scrooge leaves work and eats dinner in a tavern, like in the book. Granted, it might not be the usual melancholy tavern of the book, as there are people enjoying themselves in this scene, but Scrooge is clearly melancholy. The scene of Marley on the door knocker is incredibly quick. Scrooge does react to it, but we have no indication that it's Marley. If you're not going to have Scrooge say Marley here, you need to establish what he looked like before this. Have a painting of him in the office or something. If this is your first version of the story, and it's an animated version for kids, so it might be, you're going to have no idea why this specific face is so important to Scrooge. There is at least considerable build up to Marley appearing as Scrooge lights a candle and makes sure no one's in the house. He tells himself it's all humbug, and then a bell rings, which ushers in Marley. The Marley scene makes the interesting choice of projecting Marley's face over flashback scenes of his life. The bright daytime scenes from his life clash with the moody, haunting nature of the Marley scene, but on the other hand, it's kind of surprising that more adaptations don't try something like this. However, Marley's regret isn't played as well as it could be. Marley regrets never having a wife or children, which is fine, but we don't get any indication that he regrets not helping people more. The whole point of the story. It's also interesting that Marley the ghost looks almost nothing like Marley the man. I suppose it's not that big of a deal since Scrooge does ask the ghost who he is, but he does presumably recognize him on the door knocker. Also, when Scrooge refuses to put more coal on the fire because it's expensive, Marley just throws a whole chair in there. It's kind of odd. Anyway, when Marley departs, Scrooge looks out the window and sees one wandering spirit. The ghost is floating by a woman with a child, just like in the book, but the ghost is crying out for help. It's a complicated take on the scene, to say the least. The Ghost of Christmas Past looks like a blonde teenage boy in a toga, which, we've never gotten that before. Every movie goes for their own version of this character, but this is a new one. In his introductory scene, we get one of the strangest exchanges in the whole thing.
But I have a cold. You will be warm enough after the life you've led.
It's a spin on "It'll be hot where you're going," which is dumb, but sure, fine, whatever. Then Scrooge asks if hell is real, and the ghost shoots it down, saying his past is hell enough. Well, which is it? Why make the hot joke in the first place if you don't think he's actually going to a fire and brimstone hell? It's really confusing. The pacing of the film is very weird, but I don't necessarily mean that in the traditional storytelling sense. There's just a lot of dead air. Take the scene at Scrooge's old school, for instance. Scrooge and the ghost see the school. The ghost tells him that there was one child left there, and they walk up to the school. The door opens, Scrooge looks around, and then asks, "Who is this child?" It seems to be playing it as if Scrooge genuinely doesn't know, which is odd since he was there. We cut to a shot of the school's empty hallway, zoom in on a door, then we're back to Scrooge and the ghost walking towards the door. We see them walking, then the shot jumps ahead of them to an empty frame, and then we see them approach this door. It's a baffling transition and an editing disaster. They stand in the doorway, then we pan across the room and see a young Scrooge alone. Then we cut back to old Scrooge who says, "Look, it's Ali Baba." We then see Ali Baba standing outside the window. Despite the messiness of this scene, it's the first time we see a book character coming to life for Scrooge. It was halfway there in the Richard Williams version, but there's no doubt about it here. I will say that once we get past the caricatured Scrooge of the opening, Ron Haddrick is pretty good here. He sells the emotional turmoil and sadness in Scrooge, and he definitely deserved to be in a better production than the two he was in.
There was a boy just like that singing a Christmas carol at my door yesterday.
Similarly, the transition to Fezziwigs is quite confusing. It's just fading between shots, many of them not relevant to the scene we're in at all. Are they just killing time? It's not really atmospheric. When Scrooge talks about what a great party Fezziwig could throw, he starts dancing, with no music playing yet, which leads the spirit to ask him,
What's the matter with you? Got a beetle in your pants?
"A beetle in your pants." I've never heard that expression before. I suppose it means something akin to ants in your pants, since we never hear Wonderful Christmas Time start playing in the vicinity of Scrooge's trousers. Since this thing has such a low budget, the party's only guests are Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig, Scrooge and Dick Wilkins, a fiddler, and the Fezziwig's two daughters. Real wonderful time there, I guess. Not much choice in who to dance with. In the second adaptation in a row, we get what sounds like we have Sir Roger de Coverley at home. It can't be that hard to find some sheet music of it, come on. Clearly you have a vague sense of what it sounds like anyway. In the breakup scene with Belle, the ghost age shames Scrooge a lot.
You were a bit older here. Were you 35?
25.
The face is that of a 35-year-old.
I was 25.
People didn't exactly age well at the time, get over it. The book also specifically says that he was older but hadn't particularly aged, so clearly they didn't read it at all. Weirdly, this version does have every scene of the past from the book. We get Scrooge alone at school reading, Fan getting Scrooge from school, the party at Fezziwig's, the breakup with Belle, and the scene with Belle and her husband 7 Christmas Eves ago. It's kind of shocking. When we meet the ghost of Christmas Present, he's dressed in a red robe and has a white beard, because apparently they're just going to go all in with the Santa Claus thing. The feast around him is pretty meager as well, thanks to the animation. We get the standard "Have you had any brothers more than 1800" exchange, but the movie must think its viewers are morons, because it then has the ghost say,
By the year 2000, there will be 2,000 of us.
"Yeah, thanks, we got it." The ghost first takes Scrooge to the streets of London, where people are standing in line for the bakers, and he uses his torch to increase the size of their meals. We've only seen the torch do this kind of thing a few times, and we've only seen it in the street scene in A Christmas Carol 1938 and the Richard Williams cartoon. The ghost even breaks up a fight between two men with the spirit of Christmas. Unfortunately, we don't get a debate about whether the bakers should be opened on Sunday, but I wouldn't have been too surprised at this point. Like I said before, Ron Haddrick does get better as this special goes along, and he portrays a more sympathetic Scrooge, but he has to say bah humbug so many times. The Scrooge of the book stops saying it after the first stave. This has to be a record for most times it's said. It's not his catchphrase. Humbug just means something that isn't real. This Scrooge just says it every time something bugs him. Like in the Marley scene, the Christmas dinner at the Cratchits incorporates flashback. When Bob talks about Tiny Tim behaving well in church, we pan across the church and see him sitting down. He doesn't really do anything, which makes it an utterly pointless flashback. Sure, film is a visual medium, so I understand the rule of show don't tell, but they are also telling and they're not really showing. It feels more like they just thought it would be boring for kids to watch a guy talking. This thing feels like it constantly has to be in motion, if that makes sense. That music track is always playing underneath it, and it rarely holds on anything. It's not incredibly obnoxious like some later cartoons would be, but it is noticeable. Perhaps they thought that kids would get bored without this constant key jingling. The actor playing Bob Cratchit is quite good in this scene, and I wish I knew his name so I could compliment him, but the credits aren't going to help me.
As good as gold, and even better. He gets thoughtful, sitting by himself. He's a very thoughtful boy.
His voice is world-weary but kindly, and we really believe he wants to do the best by his family. Well, in the 1935 version, we got to see lighthouse keepers and sailors celebrating Christmas, but no miners. In the 1951 film, we got miners, but no lighthouse keepers or sailors. Ready for another weird combination? In this version, we get just the lighthouse keepers. All we need is a version with just sailors now. There is a version coming up called Ebenezer Scrooge, so maybe that's about pirates. Fred's party, unsurprisingly, is a little less lively than usual. It's just 4 people sitting around a table. They play a guessing game, but any other games are left to the imagination. When the ghost takes Scrooge somewhere else to meet ignorance and want, we can briefly see the edge of the paper that I mentioned earlier. How did no one catch this? The scene with ignorance and want is also incredibly brief. The ghost tells Scrooge who they are and that they are man's children, and Scrooge asks if they have anywhere to go, but doesn't really explain who they are. We barely have any time with them. Admittedly, I do understand why a lot of kids' versions leave this pair of characters out. I don't think it's that they're too scary or too dark for kids. There's plenty of darkness in this story that kids can understand and handle, including poverty and potential death of a child. It's a ghost story, after all. I think it's just the concepts being explained in this way may be a little too complicated for a young audience. The dialogue would need to be rewritten to have a child understand that Scrooge is ignoring those less fortunate and focusing instead on his own gain. It may be tough for a child to understand this through metaphorical children who aren't really their own characters. I don't recall struggling with it when I saw versions of the story when I was young, but I honestly can't remember when I first saw a version with them in it, so who's to say? They're not in Mickey's Christmas Carol, they're not in the Muppets version. In fact, this is only the fourth time we've seen them in any adaptation so far. The other ones include the 1951 film with Alistair Sim, the Richard Williams short, and the Michael Hordern adaptation. They are, however, much more common in future adaptations. Ultimately, I'm all for including them, even in a kid's version, but there needs to be more. Commit to it or don't, but don't go halfway like this. Even if they decided against it, this film does thankfully include the poverty themes of the book, including the scene outside the baker's, which is important to the greater themes. Want even more Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast? Just go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast, where for just $5 a month you can get a monthly bonus episode every month of the year. There I cover various TV shows versions of A Christmas Carol, and this month I'll be covering Family Ties, A Keaton Family Christmas. For $10 a month, you can even vote on what episode I do next. Additionally, for just $1 a month, you can get all episodes 24 hours early. Again, just go to patreon.com/Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast or follow the link in the description. I know I get quite particular about the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come scenes and how they play out, but they're just done badly so often. This adaptation is no exception. The only difference is that I have a totally different string of criticisms to lobby at this one. The first scenes take place in the daytime, and that same incessant cheery music is playing underneath. It's not really atmospheric. Also, instead of seeing men around the exchange talk about Scrooge's death, we see the charity workers doing so in the street. These are supposed to be good people, but this scene is supposed to show the utter nonchalance towards Scrooge's death. You can't really do that with these characters. Then Scrooge sees his usual spot in the tavern where someone else is sitting, just to hammer it home. They also play this Scrooge as too dumb to realize what's going on. His questions don't suggest that he's in denial, but simply that he doesn't know he's dead.
But that's my place. I'm here every day at 1 o'clock. This is the future, isn't it? I see I've carried out my resolution to work through the lunch hour.
The charity workers even describe Bob Cratchit in all but name, so it just makes Scrooge look profoundly dumb. We get the scene at Old Joe's, the body under the sheet, and the morning Cratchits, and there's even one scene we've never gotten fully in a previous adaptation. It's a very short scene in the book, but it's profoundly haunting. This court, said Scrooge, to which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away? The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. Scrooge tries one last time to deny his own death, but he cannot. We get a strange version of that scene here, where a new man works at his office and even donates to the charity workers, who are in yet another scene. The only thing is, it's dark out when Scrooge walks the streets, but the man is giving to the charity workers at daytime. They're clearly just reusing backgrounds from the earlier scenes, but come on, try a little. Ron Haddrick plays the redemption scenes quite well, and the movie at least gives the Christmas morning scenes some time to breathe.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall survive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and Christmas time be praised for this.
Scrooge takes time talking with the boy on the street, and he gets to impress the guests at Fred's party. The expressions are overdrawn and the Dutch angles are there, but it doesn't ruin it, and it doesn't rush it. With each animated adaptation, I find myself asking why it exists. Not necessarily a bad thing, just asking why it exists. The previous Australian one was simply a cash in to keep kids mildly entertained, and no effort was paid to faithfulness to the source material. The animation was cheap, and that was in line with the storytelling. Here I'm a little confused. The animation is pretty dreadful, and the voice acting is hit and miss. But someone is clearly trying to include a lot from the book. It's paced horribly, but a lot of it is in there. Now, I don't think all animation is inherently for kids, as the 1971 cartoon is absolutely not aiming for them, but it feels like this one is. It doesn't really add much humor, though, and it's really quite slow. Slow can be great, but this is also not atmospheric. If you've got an hour and 8 minutes to work with, I'm confused why you would fill it this way. This could have just been a tight 45, and they could have cut all the filler scenes that are just panning across a room. We always get people walking in and out of frame, and it often lacks continuity. Ultimately, this isn't a disaster like in the 1969 version. It's got some weird moments, but it also tells the story passably. There's just not much about it to recommend. Let's take a look at where it falls on the adaptation meter. Okay, little recap here first. Our current high scorer with 69.5 is the 1977 BBC adaptation with Michael Hordern. Second is the Richard Williams cartoon from 1971 with 67.5. And third is the 1951 Alistair Sim film with 65.5. A Christmas Carol 1982 scores 64 points. It's a lot of points. There are some scenes we do not get in other versions, like walking the streets on Christmas Day, the lighthouse keepers. A lot from the past is in here. This is, by this metric, the fourth most accurate adaptation so far, and yet it's really not that faithful. One of those things where you can't just judge it by the numbers, because I would at least say the Michael Hordern version, like, yeah, it's a faithful adaptation, but it's not a good adaptation. This I wouldn't even say is a faithful adaptation. It's so bizarre. Stay tuned here for a few more thoughts, and I'll talk about what next week is going to bring. All right, that is A Christmas Carol 1982. Chronologically, the earliest adaptation I'll be covering this season, but you can see why I wanted to start with Mickey Mouse. That's the iconic one. This one, again, as with earlier animated versions, I am sure there are people who grew up with this. Maybe this was someone's first adaptation. As with any version, if this was your first, please tell me. I am very curious about what your first adaptation was. And if it was this, what did you think of the story? Because it tells it, but I would argue not in a compelling way. But maybe for kids it works. I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like it's paced in such a way that kids would really enjoy. It's far better than the other Australian version I've watched, the 1960s one. That was shorter, but it was mean and didn't understand the story and really had no redemption. So this is far better. This has redemption. And Ron Haddrick vindicates that last performance at least because he's decent here. He does play the redemption nicely, and he plays the more sincere moments earlier on pretty well too. I don't think he's like a great Scrooge or anything, but he's sure better than he was in the previous one. But again, no one could have saved that because the character wasn't written in a good way. The redemption wasn't even there, so he vindicates himself here. Again, this was written by someone who had written other Dickens adaptations, which I think shows. I bet this was just meant to be a cheap cartoon for kids, and someone just wanted to write a more faithful version, and in some ways they did. Again, much more than the early one. But it's still very strange. I think so much is the limitation of the animation they had, I imagine, and I don't really know because there isn't a lot of information on these. So it's got a good number of scenes from the book. We get the lighthouse, which is nice. I always like having those scenes, but it doesn't have the atmosphere of the book. It's not paced deliberately. It's just slow. Like I said, those long, long panning scenes and long repeated scenes of walking. It's just padding it out, and I think that shows. Usually I'm saddened when an adaptation is too short because I feel like, oh, you could have done more with more time. The Richard Williams one I've talked about like that. Or Mickey's, could they both have been 50 minutes? Could they have been feature length even? Would they have been better for it? Probably, but there also would have had to be a lot more work put into them in the case of Richard Williams one. It would have taken so long because that one took so long to make as it was. They were overworking themselves. It was, as creative people who don't want to admit to bad working hours say, it was a labor of love. And I think the working hours on that were pretty rough from what I've read. It's a great finished product, of course, but that doesn't justify stretching your animators to 20-hour days or whatever. Uh, the Disney one, I don't think had that. To be fair, I've never heard anything like that. But this one, this is the only one that I think that I've seen so far where I think it needs to be shorter, or it will at least benefit from being shorter, because the pacing just it's so slow. It's only an hour eight, but like I said, those walking scenes, those panning scenes, just so sluggish. I don't know why it feels the need to do certain things. And switching from daylight to night time and the yet to come scenes, it needed another cast. It needed more people who cared. I think the screenwriter cared. It doesn't look like too many other people cared. Ron Haddrick obviously cared. Most of the voice acting beyond that is pretty bland. Yeah, so there's just again not too much interesting about this one. I can say about the earlier Australian one, it's interesting in just how terrible it is. This one in the past, I had seen this kind of as a joke to say, "Oh, is this the worst Christmas Carol adaptation?" And I probably would have said it was. It's definitely not. It's just a fine adaptation. Again, I've talked about some that are far worse. The other Australian one, the Rich Little one, those are at the bottom two for me at the moment. But yeah, this one is it's okay. But I'm very curious again, like with others. If you saw this as a kid, let me know what you thought. How did it register? Is it nostalgic for you now? I honestly don't know if it is for anyone, but I imagine some people grew up with it. Maybe it aired in America. I'm not sure. I know the other one did, the other Australian one, but I'm not sure about this one. So yeah, let me know if you have any specific memories attached to this one. Hey, so I am in the final stages of editing this episode, and I have to put this in here because even before I published it, I had someone reach out to me about this episode. I had posted a clip on social media and someone reached out and said they grew up with this version. So I'm going to shout them out here because this is really cool. So on Blue Sky, like I said, I posted the clip, just a little joke about that scene where Scrooge is dancing. And someone on Blue Sky replied, "Here's the whole thing. I think it's Australian." They posted a link to it. And he said he loved it at the time. His Blue Sky name is David, the King of Kemptown. And I asked him, "Hey, what did you love about it? I'm very curious because I don't know much about this version." And quote, here's what he said. Besides the story, I liked the animation at the time, and the voice acting seemed very earnest. There's also something suitably cold about it. I just saw that Anne Hattie, Helen from Neighbors, did the voice of Fan. Again, David, thank you so much for that comment. I really appreciate people reaching out about versions they saw, especially these obscure ones, because I don't have a lot of history on this one. So even just someone saying, hey, I watched this growing up, that is history, and that is really important to me to get. So I really appreciate that. Uh, yeah, the voice acting is definitely earnest, especially from Ron Haddrick, who's very good in a lot of the scenes here. Uh, like I said, I didn't name the other actors just because I didn't want to get anything wrong and there wasn't any official credit. I'm not saying the names you see on IMDb are wrong. They're probably correct. I just don't want to take a chance when I don't even have a face associated with it and it's not an actor I can recognize the voice of. So, yeah, again, David, thank you very, very much for that comment. And whether the episode has been posted already, even if it's, a year in the future you're listening to this, uh, comment, let me know if you've seen this version because I will shout you out at some point. I'm very curious, like on any adaptation, but particularly these obscure ones that don't have a lot of history, don't have a lot of acclaim, aren't that well known. If people have a personal connection to them, I want to hear it. Next week, we get to talk about two adaptations, and these are weird. We've had Mickey's, the timeless classic. We've had this, the obscure 80s Australian adaptation. We've got two weird ones next week. All right. First up, Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas. Yeah, from that name alone. Kind of tells you what you need to know about it. It's not a rock opera. It's not a musical, okay? It's a lot of Christmas songs with some Scrooge kind of shoehorned in without giving away the whole game. Second of all, it's going to be weirder. I don't want to spoil the fun here. If you've not heard of this, just hang tight. Ebenezer Scrooge. I'm just going to tell you the title. It's from the 80s. It's from Canada. I'm not going to tell you more than that because I have some things to say about this one. I think it's going to be fun. Yeah, Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas, Ebenezer Scrooge. That is next week. Thank you for listening to Scrooge, a Christmas Carol podcast. Scrooge, a Christmas Carol podcast is written, hosted, and edited by Colin Murr. Theme music is Christmas Day by TRG Banks, and TRG Banks' Snowfall is also used for interstitial music. Clips in this episode are from A Christmas Carol 1982. Leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing on YouTube will be a big help to me. You can also back me on Patreon for early episodes, bonus episodes, and the right to vote in polls. Link is in the description. I'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Scrooge, a Christmas Carol podcast. Until then, make sure to live in the past, the present, and the future, and ensure that the spirits of all three strive within you.